Hi, if you're watching this video, you may be considering the purchase of a Phob Gamecube controller for playing Super Smash Bros. Melee or Ultimate. The controller modder that I chose to purchase my Phob from was Rienne Customs. You may be familiar with their team's work for a variety of reasons, including referrals from some notable top players. Here are some examples. For those unfamiliar, here's a summary per the project's documentation at the time of publishing. Please note the claims made here are from the project's documentation and are not my own. If you would like more information about the project, at the time of publishing, it can be found here. In this repository, there is also a link to the PhobGCC Discord, which has a tremendous amount of information on the project you may find useful for coming to your own conclusions. I encourage you to visit if you are considering one of these controllers. After researching Phob controllers and deciding that I'd like to purchase one for personal use, I came across the PhobGCC Discord. In this Discord, there's an approved PhobGCC vendor list, shown here. After observing top players with strong referrals and seeing that Rienne Customs is on this approved PhobGCC vendor list, I decided to order a controller through their website, shown here. I placed the order on August 11th. The specific controller I ordered and its itemized pricing structure is listed here. The base price of the Phob 1.2 pre-order commission slot at the time of purchase was $275 US. As shown, the additional customizations added to the controller were the following: left and right trigger package, shortened ABXY buttons, tactile Z-switch, 3-meter paracord, emerald blue shell instead of the default smash black, wave dash notches. The total cost of the controller was $430. Shipping was $10 for a grand total of $440. Per the website, I was expecting to receive the controller in a maximum of 3 months from the order date, August 11th, 2022. When purchasing, I remember the site saying most orders are fulfilled within 2 to 3 weeks, but wait times may be up to 3 months. This has since changed on the site, but regardless, I was fully prepared to wait up to 3 months for the order. After ordering, I reached out via the website's contact form to ask a question about the shortened buttons, as well as to ask about paracord color options. The first time I reached out was right after ordering in August, and then I followed up in October. After I didn't receive a response both times, I messaged them on Twitter on October 11th, the 2-month mark, where I got an immediate response, explaining that most likely those contact form submissions hit a spam filter. Rienne answered my question about the shortened buttons right away, and had a suggestion on a color for the paracord that works well with the emerald blue shell I decided to go with. I was told that my controller was probably shipping towards the end of this month or early November, and that they were a little behind, but working heavily through their queue. On November 8th, I checked in via Twitter on my order again. I was told that they were getting to it, that it would probably be a couple of weeks, but work has started, and that they're still a little behind. For those unfamiliar, Phob 1.2 is based around a Teensy 4.0 microcontroller, which had experienced unforeseen shortages around this time in 2022, and was sold out in most places with the exception of scalpers. As this was an uncontrollable supply shortage from the manufacturer of this component, I asked if there was a Teensy supply issue, as I would have completely understood at this point if that was affecting orders. I was told supply isn't the issue, and it was due to how busy they were, that they have all their parts and 4 people working constantly, and that Phobs take a lot of time. On November 25th, I reached out again, as I had not received any updates. I was told that they believe that order is wrapping up and should be to me shortly after the weekend. On December 5th, I reached out again as I had not received any updates. At this point, we were approaching the 4-month mark. I asked if I could please get a more concrete delivery date, a tracking number, or a refund, as I had made plans to have this controller by the 3-month mark, including an event which it didn't make it in time for. I also wanted to know a more concrete delivery window because I was traveling soon for the holidays. I was told my order would be going out in the next shipping batch, that it looked like it would be picked up on Wednesday, December 7th, and that they would have tracking for me once the labels are printed that would also go to my email address. They apologized about the delays and explained to me that Phobs have been tricky to build well, that they've had a lot of production issues that they wanted to make sure I don't get stuck with, and that due to this, quality assurance has been a very long process. Due to my travel plans changing, I asked the next day if they could change the shipping address to where I was traveling for the holidays. They said it was no issue at all, and this was immediately accommodated for. I was also told the controller would be going out the following day, Wednesday, December 7th. On the 7th, they reached out and let me know that the controller was packed up, that I'd have tracking information shortly, and that it would go to my email address as well. I received tracking information via Twitter and email the next day around noon. I received the controller on December 12th. The controller was packaged in a cardboard shipping box, securely wrapped in a paper-based bubble wrap alternative, and the controller itself was individually sealed in an appropriately sized plastic bag, along with a nice quality business card with their contact information. Upon initial inspection and examination of the outside of the controller, I noticed that there were stress marks in the plastic of the shell in a variety of places, and that there was also a decent amount of yellowing. Here are pictures of the controller's exterior condition out of the box. I messaged via Twitter, thanking them for sending the controller, but that I was reaching out because I felt the emerald blue shell I received was in less than ideal condition. I explained that due to the nature of the age and origin of emerald blue shells, I was understanding of light scuffs and scratches, even the yellowing although it was fairly strong, but that the stress marks in the plastic were concerning. I also asked if this may have happened in shipping. I received an immediate response. They stated that the stress marks were weird and that they didn't remember seeing that. They also said that the yellowing was present and that it's really hard to find super clean emeralds these days, so some had a little bit of cosmetic burn. They said to please test and to let them know because that's a little concerning, and that hopefully it wasn't damaged in transit. I responded saying I understood the yellowing and the surface issues, and that the stress marks are what I felt was over the top considering the $40 premium I paid for the shell color. I also said that I would test out to see if there were any functional issues. They then stated that they don't ship things with stress marks like that those indicate issues to them that can crop up later with things like screw posts and shell warp, so they don't use them, and that holiday USPS is hell. They also said worst case, if I was okay with it, I could get sent a replacement shell once they get their next batch of emeralds in, that it would be around 3 weeks or so, but that they wanted to get me something that doesn't look whipped out the gate. I let Rienne know that I appreciate it, that I'd be okay with a replacement shell, and that I'm comfortable with the inside of a controller, so I don't mind swapping the shell over on my end. I also informed them that functionally so far, the controller was good, and that I'd let them know if there were any further issues. They responded right away saying they'd contact me when that batch comes in. I thanked them and let them know that the trigger treatment on the controller felt excellent. When ordering the controller, I had never used shortened buttons, but wanted to give them a try against my usual preference of balded buttons. I also have a personal preference towards stabilizing the ABXY buttons and sometimes the triggers with PTFE or Teflon low friction tape. Since this wasn't an option when ordering, and I wasn't sure how stable the shortened buttons would feel, I opted to wait until getting the controller in hand to make a decision on the matter. The following day, I decided to open up the controller for the first time to stabilize the shortened buttons. When inspecting the inside of the controller, I was surprised to find a significant amount of plastic dust on the button pad present, which I believed was due to the buttons not being fully cleaned or rinsed off after being sanded down to their shorter height, pictured here. After seeing this, I sent these 2 pictures via Twitter and asked if the buttons weren't cleaned off after they were sanded short. I was told that they did sand them down, that more dust is left than usual though, and that they might start actually rinsing them afterwards. I was also told to just tap them on a hard surface and dust the pad off, and that a little dust from these is normal, but doesn't impact durability or performance. I responded saying I would clean the pad and wash the buttons off, but that I was shocked these didn't get rinsed off after being sanded. I did not receive a reply. As of the publishing of this video, I haven't heard back about the shell replacement as well. Also, while the controller was open, I saw that one of the motherboard retention posts was broken. As there was no remnants of the broken piece in the shipping materials or the controller itself, I believe it's reasonable to assume that this damage existed prior to shipping, pictured here along with a strong stress mark I noticed around the circumference of the screw posts by the D-pad. Between the date of the original order to the time I received this commission on December 12th, I had experience building 5 Phob 1.2 controllers and used the official assembly guide video to do so. I want to clarify that I'm not a professional controller modder and do not sell controllers for profit or at cost. I have, however, read and viewed the assembly video for PhobGCC 1.2 several times, as I used it to build controllers for myself and family members. Because of this, as I inspected the rest of the inside of the controller I received from Rienne, I noticed a few discrepancies between what was shown in the PhobGCC 1.2 assembly video and what I saw on the motherboard. The main concern being that the Hall effect sensor legs on the main stick were not trimmed below the height of the stick box screws. Per the documentation, they should be no taller than the screw heads for the stick box. If you don't do this, it makes the controller harder to reassemble and may break the solder joints, pictured here. I also noticed that the plastic loop on the rumble bracket had not been cut off, highlighted in this picture. I remembered that at one point it was recommended to cut this, as it may touch the bottom solder joint of the Hall effect sensor directly adjacent to it. The current written Phob 1.2 assembly guide does not list this step anymore, and I don't believe it's necessary. However, the assembly video does have this step at 44 minutes and 6 seconds. I looked at the vendor list section of the PhobGCC Discord again, and per bullet point number 2, decided to reach out to a PhobGCC team member privately. In this case, the creator of the PhobGCC 1.2 assembly video. I shared my primary concerns with the motherboard assembly, pictures, as well as my experience with the shell condition and the buttons to get a second opinion. I also explained that I understood this is an open source project, that they were not responsible in any way for these issues, and that I only wanted to bring this to their attention, as I imagined if someone used and trusted the vendor list to purchase a Phob, paid a premium, and received this controller and never opened it, they might never be aware that there's plastic dust inside that could migrate to lubricated components over time, that internals may be pressing on these sensors which could cause issues later, and that the quality assurance overall did not match what the Phob project's documentation stated. There was agreement from the vendor list's author that the dust inside the controller from sanding was not appropriate. I shared the reply I received re-tapping them on a hard surface, dusting the pad, and the dust not impacting durability or performance, and they mentioned that this statement was suspect. Based on the pictures I sent of the motherboard, they replied that the Hall sensor pins might be okay, but to check the cover over the triggers to see if it's pressing holes into it, and if so, that's not good. I inspected the cover over the triggers, pictured here. I sent this picture and stated that I saw 2 marks, one beside the ABS marking and one on the vertical post, but that I was unsure if those markings were the pressing hole marks from the pins they were referring to. They replied confirming that they are in fact the marks from the pins pressing on the cover. After this response, I inspected the rest of the soldering on the motherboard. These pictures are of the C-stick ribbon cable, the cable connector, the right trigger potentiometer, and the top of the Teensy 4.0 microcontroller. In summary, I'd like to clarify a few things. The purpose of this video is to share my customer experience as objectively as possible. I want to clarify that I'm not a top player, nor a notable member in any way of the Smash community. I am, however, someone who has played Melee since 2001, starting with an original 1.0 Melee disc and released a Gamecube on CRT, all the way up to the current Slippy era. I've also played on and owned T1, T2, and T3 OEM controllers, JP Whites, new Smash Blacks, Phob 1.2s in a variety of configurations, and a Goomwave. I've also made direct comparisons between them at my personal play level. I'd like to point out that at the time of publishing, Phob 2.0 has recently been released, which has many of the components required for the build surface mounted, making the overall project less expensive and easier to build with less failure points. Both Phob 2.0s and 1.2.3s, when assembled properly from the player perspective, play the same and run the same software per the project's creators. I also want to clarify that although I received responses that I personally felt were not satisfactory, no one ever spoke to me rudely, and all conversations were polite and prompt as soon as I learned Twitter was their primary mode of communication. I want to point out that I've had notches commissioned separately by someone who works on the Rienne Customs team, which were reasonably priced, exceptionally done, and performed with an incredibly quick turnaround time, with great communication throughout. This is not necessarily a reflection of those individuals' separate business. I also want to be clear that I don't doubt Rienne and company are able to make an excellent controller. She does have a lot of experience, has contributed quite a bit of time and information to controller modding in general, and is also a part of many reputable related organizations. Also, as someone who has built multiple Phobs of this version I ordered, I don't consider the price point at the time of ordering prior to receiving the controller unreasonable or overpriced. Although this may seem like a relatively expensive controller, and you can certainly source a Phob for less, to build one Phob for yourself, the cost of the equipment required if you don't already own it, soldering iron, solder station, quality solder, a tri-wing screwdriver, etc., the quantity cost of purchasing one motherboard and parts, as well as the research, skills, and primarily time required to build one, on paper this price point isn't too inflated, given that the build is from a notable modder, which tends to come with a premium. I also want to clarify that I'm not explicitly telling you to purchase or not to purchase a controller from this individual. All I want to do is express to you my customer experience, how much I paid, how long it took for me to receive, what I received exactly, and how I was communicated with. Ask yourself, if you paid this amount of money, waited this amount of time, and received this quality of controller, would you be satisfied with your purchase? I leave that assessment Up to you.